I had coffee last week with an old friend I hadn't seen in a year. On paper, he is absolutely crushing it. He had just gotten another promotion at a big tech firm, and he was telling me about the complexity of the projects he was leading, the size of the teams, the late-night calls with Singapore. He had that familiar, sharp energy of someone who is undeniably successful in the world's eyes. But then, after the second espresso, the energy shifted. He leaned forward, lowered his voice, and said something that really stuck with me. He said, I feel less like a person and more like a high-performance asset that my company deploys. He described his life as being ruthlessly optimized, his sleep tracked for productivity, his social life scheduled like a quarterly review, his own creativity filed away under hobbies for retirement. He wasn't living a life. He was managing a human resource, and that resource was him. He was completely burned out. And it was that contrast that I couldn't shake. The person the world saw as a massive success felt, in his own words, like he was being strip-mined for value. It made me wonder, when did we decide that our economic self had to be at war with our human self? And what would it look like to build a life, and even an economy, where the goal isn't just to be a productive asset, but to be a whole, thriving human being? Yeah, that story, it really hit home for me. And it just perfectly sets the stage for what we're diving into today. This deep dive is really about exploring a pretty radical idea. What if our whole understanding of value, economy, maybe even success, what if it needs a complete overhaul? So we're kind of going on a journey here, exploring how we can build a life, and an economy where the goal isn't just being, a productive asset, but being a whole, thriving human being. We'll try to uncover some surprising facts, I think, and some intriguing insights about how we can shift our perspective, from the individual level right up to global policy. What if our most human qualities, our time, our attention, our inner alignment, what if those are the real currencies of the future? Okay, so let's try and unpack this. Maybe start with a micro level example. Someone trying to literally redefine value within a corporate structure. I heard about this software architect in California, a guy named Kenji Tanaka. Apparently he was at the absolute peak of his career. Lead architect, major tech firm, making a salary most people, could only dream of. But despite all that external success, he was just profoundly burned out, like regularly working 80-hour weeks, energy totally shot, focus splintered across like a dozen different projects.
Wow, 80 hours. That's intense.
Right. He felt like his creativity was just being squeezed out, leaving him feeling kind of hollowed out. So instead of just, walking away, Kenji did something, truly radical. He went to his company's board with this completely unprecedented proposal, a new kind of contract. He actually offered to take a 50% pay cut.
50%? Seriously?
Yeah, you heard that right. Half his huge salary. But in exchange, he wanted his value measured completely differently. He negotiated for a strict 30-hour work week. And get this, a guaranteed 4 deep work hours every single day. No meetings, no interruptions. And here's the real kicker. He proposed a brand new metric for his bonus. It wouldn't just be based on, project completion or lines of code. No, it would be tied to the inner alignment of his team.
Inner alignment? How would they even measure that?
Through anonymous surveys, focusing on their sense of purpose and overall well-being. What really strikes me about Kenji's story isn't just that he negotiated for, better work-life balance. That's part of it, sure. But this felt like a tangible, audacious attempt to rewrite the very source code of value inside a major corporation. He was basically forcing the system to acknowledge that his focused attention, his ability to do that really concentrated creative work, and his team's collective well-being, they weren't just like nice-to-haves. He argued they were direct, measurable assets, just as valuable, he said, to the company's long-term innovation and success as the actual software they shipped. He was essentially trying to create a whole new kind of currency out of human energy and, psychological alignment.
That's what's truly fascinating here is how Kenji's approach just directly challenges that ingrained traditional notion of value. For far too long, our economic systems have almost exclusively measured value by tangible output, right? Mm-hmm. Monetary gain, units shipped, lines of code written, hours billed, that sort of thing. Kenji, though, he posited that his capacity for deep, uninterrupted focus and the collective inner state of his team, these were not simply soft skills or, just desirable workplace perks. He argued they were actual, quantifiable economic drivers. He was basically saying, look, my ability to concentrate without distraction, to be truly present, innovative, and my team's sense of purpose and well-being, they directly contribute to the quality, the ingenuity, and ultimately the market success of our products.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fundamental reevaluation. It really is. Redefining what we consider productive and compensable. It's an attempt to redefine what work actually means, moving beyond a purely time or output model to one that recognizes the profound qualitative aspects of human contribution. I mean, you simply cannot sustainably burn out your most valuable people, the most creative, focused ones, and expect continuous innovation and high-quality output. It just doesn't work long-term. Kenji was trying to embed resilience, human flourishing, directly into the company's economic model.
That really deepens the understanding, yeah. And Kenji's story, it leads us perfectly into this broader concept that's been, well, gaining a lot of traction lately, the attention economy. I mean, if Kenji was valuing his own attention and his team's inner alignment so highly, it's because in our, information-saturated world, attention has become incredibly scarce and therefore incredibly valuable. It's almost like it's become a universal symbolic currency. How do we even begin to conceptualize attention like that?
Right. To really grasp attention as a currency, we kind of need to think about it as two distinct but interconnected streams. First, there's what we can call flow attention. This is the fixed finite amount of attention an individual possesses, right, and it's continuously expended. Think of it like a biological capacity, right? A mental resource that's always diminishing, like a battery that's constantly discharging, even if it's just sitting idle. So when you're actively engaged in solving a complex problem, like programming a tricky algorithm or really digging into a financial report, you're expending intense flow attention. Your brain is fully engaged, absorbing, processing. But here's the thing. Even when you're just passively scrolling through social media or maybe staring at a TV screen without really registering the content, you're still consuming a portion of your flow attention. It's a limited biological resource, always in motion, always being used up, whether you're consciously directing it or not.
So it's not just about focused effort, but any kind of mental engagement, even passive stuff, drains this finite resource. That's a really crucial distinction.
Yeah.
And if that's the battery that's constantly draining, where does the currency aspect actually come in?
Exactly. And that brings us to the second stream, calcified attention. Now, this is the variable external accumulation of attention. It's like the visible, storable traces left behind by that fleeting flow attention. Think of it maybe like a digital ledger. Social media platforms especially have just mastered the art of making this ephemeral flow attention visible and storable, allowing it to accumulate and become this quantifiable asset. A good analogy might be your flow attention is the actual water you drink from a fountain it's consumed, gone. But calcified attention is like the visible collection of empty water bottles you've accumulated afterwards. Other people can see those bottles, they can count them, and they infer something about your past consumption or maybe your influence, which in turn might incentivize others to offer you more water in the future. It becomes a signal.
Okay. Here's where it gets really interesting and, quite tangible for all of us. Think about how a YouTube video's view count immediately influences its algorithmic suggestion to more viewers. It creates this self-reinforcing feedback loop. Or on Instagram, right? Every like isn't just a fleeting moment of approval. It acts as a kind of hard currency for social comparison. It's publicly visible. It quantifies a user's personal audience, the people who regularly pay attention to them. It's like a digital manifestation of reputation, isn't it? A public display of previous success in attracting attention.
Precisely. Calcified attention signifies reputation and status. It's that public display of previous success and attracting attention. And crucially, it carries the promise of attracting more attention in the future. That's key. This is where its convertibility into other symbolic currencies like money or even political power becomes undeniably clear. I mean, take influencer marketing. That's a perfect example. Content creators with massive follower counts, that's their calcified attention, they command incredibly high sponsorship fees. Why? Because their accumulated attention signals their ability to channel the flow attention of their audience directly towards a product or a message. In the political realm, you see it too. We see these micro-donations of time and effort likes, shares, follows, signing petitions. They draw more people into political discourse, particularly younger age groups. This calcified digital engagement influences narratives, it shapes public opinion, and it can even mobilize real-world action. What's truly intriguing, and maybe a little unsettling, is this concept that money now sort of tracks attention. Those who consistently and effectively attract attention often find it easier to generate wealth, which reflects a pretty fundamental shift in how value is generated in our information economy. It really suggests that if you can capture the public's eye, you're already halfway to unlocking financial success. And this isn't just a digital thing, right? We see real-world examples too, like time banks. These are agency-based credit systems. Here, individuals perform social services for credits. They're essentially converting their flow attention, their time spent on pro-social activity into a form of calcified attention, like a socially reputable labor credit. And these credits can then be called in for favors or services from others within that community. The motivations for participating often go beyond just purchasing power. People aim to improve society, their quality of life, by fostering this reciprocal community support. However, this model also raises some pretty important ethical implications, especially when you consider the potential for dystopian portrayals of attention economies. Things like social credit systems, where certain antisocial behaviors could be punished with a loss of social standing or purchasing power. This brings up really complex questions about wealth distribution and whether an individual's social credit should be tied to their economic participation, or if certain behaviors should result in a loss of economic opportunity. It makes you wonder, in an attention economy, do some individuals or celebrities become too big to cancel? Just like the super rich might be less impacted by financial penalties than someone with less means. These systems really highlight the complex interplay between attention, social standing, and economic participation. They force us to consider who sets the rules for this new currency. And stepping back even further, let's think about the philosophical underpinnings of this whole human-centric value idea. Traditional economic theory, which has largely governed our current systems for, centuries, it's deeply rooted in what you might call a mechanistic, matter-only worldview. It tends to view the world as just a collection of isolated parts, often ignoring the interconnectedness of systems. It's very reductionist in a way. This perspective assumes scarcity is the natural state, and therefore promotes competition as the main driver of progress. Immaterial values, things like compassion, well-being, creativity, even the dignity of labor, they were often ignored, right? Deemed unmeasurable or seen as secondary to material accumulation. You can trace this back to figures like Keynes, who sometimes viewed ethical considerations as almost a hindrance to efficient economic progress, or even a selective reading of Adam Smith. His invisible hand is frequently detached from the broader ethical context he actually explored in his earlier foundational work, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. He believed ethical behavior and empathy were critical for markets to function, but that part often gets lost in modern economic talk. But if we contrast this with modern scientific views, even spiritual perspectives, a radically different picture starts to emerge. Modern physics, biology, psychology, they increasingly support a holistic, interconnected view of reality. We're learning more about systems thinking. We're no longer just seen as isolated building blocks or, cogs in a machine. Instead, humans are viewed more like energy flows or intangibles. Einstein's favorite epigram, apparently, was that the field generates the object, not the other way around, which implies that whole, interconnected systems give rise to specific phenomena. And to truly understand anything, you need to understand the larger context it comes from. We are continuously interrelating, changing. We're dynamic processes, not static things. This makes us much more like those intangibles that classic matter-only economic models just struggle to measure or even acknowledge.
So if we're more like energy flows than building blocks, and our economic models are built on that old building block idea, what does this new perspective fundamentally mean for how we define wealth or well-being? It sounds like a really radical departure from the idea that just material possession is the sole measure of value.
Well, it's absolutely foundational. This perspective signals our undeniable shift into what we call a knowledge economy, where know-how, creativity, innovation, what we collectively call intellectual capital, are paramount. They're the key drivers. Consider this. It's estimated that up to 80% of a modern company's value can now be intangible. That's just staggering. It points to a profound truth. That genuine happiness, real fulfillment, is derived from being, not just having. It's about who we are, what we know, how we create, the quality of our relationships, rather than simply what we consume or possess. And furthermore, modern research into human nature is consistently challenging that classical economic assumption of innate selfishness as the primary motivator. Studies in fields from neuroscience, evolutionary biology to psychology and medical science, they now overwhelmingly suggest that compassion and altruism are actually central to genuine human well-being. A compassionate frame of mind, far from being a weakness. It positively impacts mental and physical health. It can even lead to longer-term happiness and a greater sense of purpose compared to the short-term pleasure-seeking often promoted by unchecked consumerism. This completely flips the classical economic model on its head. Rather than being self-defeating, altruism, collaboration, mutual support, they're now being shown to be sources of profound well-being. And surprisingly, often more efficient in spheres like healthcare and education. When people genuinely care and collaborate, systems just become more effective, more resilient. It's a really powerful argument for explicitly integrating these intangibles, like empathy and connection, directly into our economic models and our policy decisions.
Okay, now,
Yeah.
let's try and move from these, profound theories and the micro-level examples to a much bigger, more ingrained challenge, trying to apply these human-centric ideas in a really traditional industrial setting. Try to picture this. A mid-sized, family-owned manufacturing plant, Baden-Württemberg region of Germany. For generations, they've been known for producing extremely high-quality automotive parts. Their whole identity, their legacy, it's built on precision, efficiency, and this almost sacred concept of the Taktzeit.
Yeah, yes, the cycle time. Very German precision engineering.
Exactly. That rigid, unforgiving cycle time of the assembly line. Every movement, every moment optimized for maximum output. But then a new CEO takes over. She's inspired by these very ideas of a circular human economy we've been discussing, and she decides to pilot this radical program on one of the production lines, the goal, to prioritize what she calls human rhythm. So they introduce flexible start times, longer breaks after particularly complex tasks, and even dedicated creative non-production periods, allowing workers to step away from the line to suggest process improvements or do some cross-training. I heard about the immense friction this created from someone closely connected to the project. The floor manager, let's call him Gunther, worked there 40 years. He saw it as just chaos, pure chaos. Success is measured in units per hour, he'd insist, apparently his voice booming across the factory floor. How do you measure a good rhythm? And the workers themselves were visibly split. The younger employees, who had grown up in a different world, they cautiously embraced the flexibility. But the older veterans, like Gunther, who took immense pride in their endurance, their consistency, their ability to keep pace with that demanding Taktzeit, they felt their very experience, their identity, was being devalued. They were being asked to shift from this mindset of relentless production endurance to one of holistic well-being, and it challenged their very sense of who they were as skilled German workers.
That example from the German factory is just so potent because it lays bare the immense practical and cultural challenge of this transition. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see that this factory's entire operational system, from its traditional accounting practices, its complex logistics, even the ingrained mental models of its veteran workers like Gunther, it was all built and optimized exclusively to measure and maximize tangible output, units per hour. So integrating a human rhythm model means you're not just tweaking a policy, you are fundamentally changing the DNA of the organization. You have to redefine how you schedule shifts, how you calculate bonuses, even how you report success to investors. It touches everything. It requires rethinking performance metrics far beyond a simple units per hour, massively beyond. You need to start measuring things like the innovation coming out of those creative non-production periods, or the tangible benefits of improved employee well-being, things like reduced absenteeism, lower turnover rates, and maybe even a measurable increase in product quality because workers are less fatigued, more focused. This is a deep, often uncomfortable cultural and operational overhaul. It's not simply about adopting a new policy. It's about transforming the organizational identity itself. And the resistance from someone like Gunther is entirely understandable, isn't it? His entire career, his sense of pride, his definition of worth, they're inextricably tied to those old, clearly quantifiable metrics. The real challenge isn't just conceptual. It's about embedding these new, holistic values into every single operational process. And crucially, getting everyone on board with a new definition of success. That's the hard part. And this brings us directly to the core ideas of the circular human economy, or CHE, which explicitly tries to address these very challenges. The foundational idea is profoundly simple, yet, revolutionary. You are the economy. It posits that your personal attributes, your time, your focused attention, your vital energy, your unique story, your inner alignment, these are the real fundamental currencies. This moves far beyond traditional economic indicators to acknowledge the holistic, multidimensional value each individual intrinsically brings to any system. CHE is explicitly designed as a regenerative model. That's key. Unlike extractive linear models that deplete resources and human energy, it focuses on how individuals and communities learn to consciously regenerate their energy. Regenerate their wealth, in its broadest sense, their emotional bandwidth, their creativity. Value within this framework is inherently multidimensional. It can be emotional, like strengthened community bonds, spiritual, like a renewed sense of purpose, digital, through co-created knowledge platforms, tangible, like community gardens, intellectual, through shared learning, or relational, in deeply supportive networks. The ultimate aim isn't endless, unsustainable scaling. It's conscious evolution, aligning individual purpose with broader societal impact and designing an economy that nourishes the human soul, fosters creativity, and ensures collective well-being, not just market efficiency.
And to guide this evolution, the CHE framework uses something pretty powerful called the 12-dimensional system of human value creation, sometimes called the 12 primordial elements. These aren't just abstract labels, right? They're described as living dimensions where concepts like frequency, knowledge, heart, authenticity, holistic wealth, and purpose can actually take root. This framework allows you, the listener, to measure progress not just by income, but by joy, not just by output, but by alignment, not just by possessions, but by presence. It encourages you to ask these deeply reflective questions. What does genuine freedom mean in my life? What does true value look like in this specific realm of my being? How can I design this area of my life with profound care, with intelligence, and with purpose? Let's take maybe two of these elements as an example. Think about authenticity. In a traditional economic model, your value might be measured by how well you conform to a corporate role, right? Fit in. But in the CHE, authenticity asks, am I expressing my true self? Is my work aligned with my deepest values? Measuring progress in this dimension might mean tracking moments of genuine expression, the resonance you feel in your interactions, or the congruence between your beliefs and your actions. This shift fundamentally changes your daily decisions, moving you from seeking external validation to cultivating internal integrity. Or think about holistic wealth. This moves way beyond just financial capital. It asks you to consider your wealth across all dimensions: your emotional well-being, your social connections, your intellectual growth, your physical health, and yes, your financial stability too. So, instead of just checking your bank balance, you might check in with your emotional resilience, the strength of your friendships, or the new skills you've acquired recently. This multidimensional approach encourages a regenerative mindset where you're constantly nourishing all aspects of your being, which leads to a much more resilient and fulfilling life overall. It's a truly comprehensive way of looking at personal and collective flourishing. This holistic perspective also ties into how CHE helps individuals work in alignment with their natural human rhythm, which makes so much sense. We all instinctively move through different modes, don't we? Sometimes we're in action mode, sharply focused, getting things done, generating ideas, executing tasks. Other times, we desperately need to pause and reflect, allow deeper insights to emerge, integrate new information, or just simply rest. Then there are those moments of clarity where what truly matters becomes obvious. Breakthroughs happen, our next steps crystallize. And finally, periods where we simply need to feel, care, and connect, nurturing relationships, engaging in community, allowing emotional processing. The key is honoring your personal rhythm and organizing your work and learning to match it, rather than constantly pushing against it. For example, in the short term, say the first 0 to 3 months, you might leverage a meaningful skill you already possess to earn what they call regenerative income. I read about one participant in a CHE program who started by guiding 30-minute online voice sessions just 3 times a week. Within 60 days, they had a small, dedicated circle of clients and were earning their first regenerative income, validating their unique contribution. In the medium term, maybe 3 to 12 months, the focus shifts, optimizing your time, creating assets that can generate value more passively. Another member apparently transformed their extensive journaling practice into a reflection deck, insightful prompts for daily personal growth. Sold as a digital download, it now earns them passive income, freeing up time to work on their next book and deepen their creative pursuits. And for the long term, say 1 to 5 years, the goal is to build a personal knowledge platform, a system of services, regenerative tools that truly express your purpose, something that can grow without your constant direct presence being required. Many participants in this ecosystem now co-create content, launch collaborative hubs, or license their unique tools and stories. It's all about building something that supports you long term, moving from purpose to sustainable income streams, and crucially, becoming more of yourself in the process, not less.
These powerful examples really highlight that the challenge of implementing such a system isn't just conceptual, is it? It's about systemic transformation at every single level of society. Implementing something like the circular human economy on a widespread scale, moving beyond individual or small group initiatives. It requires fundamental shifts in governance, in investment practices, in labor frameworks. Everything. Think back to that German factory again. Its traditional accounting and bonus structures would need to be completely reinvented, not just adjusted slightly. To genuinely value human rhythm or inner alignment, this kind of deep re-engineering is just immense. And this is precisely where the need for integrated governance and new policy frameworks comes right in. We need policies that don't just pay lip service to sustainability and circularity, but actively embed them into regional and industrial development plans. This means designing entire systems where holistic well-being and regenerative practices are explicitly incentivized and measured, not just financial output. This calls for what some sources refer to as middle way economics. Now, this isn't about compromising or just meeting halfway. It's about actively creating win-win solutions. Solutions that harmonize seemingly opposing forces: mind and matter, market mechanisms and government oversight, and critically, compassion and competition. For instance, a middle way economics approach might manifest in new tax incentives. Incentives tied not just to job creation, but specifically to creating jobs that also restore local ecosystems, or provide universal basic services like education and healthcare to underserved communities. It could mean designing urban planning policies where new mixed-use developments are only approved if they incorporate community gardens, affordable housing, dedicated public spaces that foster social connection, directly balancing profit incentives with profound social and environmental flourishing. This approach pushes for all economic actors, individuals, corporations, governments, to explicitly take responsibility for the health and well-being of the whole system, ensuring that economic decisions are made not just on immediate profit margins, but within a hierarchy of values that prioritize human and planetary flourishing.
Okay, let's turn now to a really powerful example of how these ideas, particularly that redefinition of success, can manifest at a truly grassroots level, and the profound psychological impact it can have on individuals and communities. I heard this compelling story from a small town in Ohio. It had been largely hollowed out after its main employer, a glass factory, shut down maybe a decade ago. For years, the town's narrative was just one of decline. You could see it in boarded-up storefronts, a kind of quiet desperation. Success was defined by what had been lost. But then a subtle yet profound shift began to happen, sparked by just a few dedicated individuals at the local library, actually. They started what they tentatively called a purpose exchange. It wasn't a formal bartering system, with complex ledgers or anything. Much simpler. Relied on trust and reciprocity. An elderly woman named Maria, who'd been a beloved head cook at the factory's canteen, started offering cooking classes to young single parents who were struggling to feed their families. A laid-off mechanic, who had apparently been battling a quiet depression since the factory closed, found new purpose. He started fixing bicycles for neighborhood kids for free. And in return, their parents would help tend his overgrown garden, bringing it back to life. Little exchanges like that. But the story that really gets me is about a young man. Let's call him Sam. He had a graphic design degree, but with 0 jobs available in his field locally, he was working a minimum wage job at the gas station, feeling increasingly adrift. Through this exchange network, he heard that the town's last remaining diner desperately needed new menus. So Sam offered to redesign them. The diner owner, described as a tough but kind woman, couldn't pay him in cash. Instead, she paid him in delicious home-cooked meals. And crucially, she vocally championed his work to every single customer who walked through her door. "Sam's our designer," she'd exclaim, proudly pointing to the new menus. Soon, other struggling small businesses, the dry cleaner, the hardware store, asked for his help with their signs, the flyers. Now, Sam's formal income didn't change much at first, but his title in the community underwent this radical transformation. He was no longer just a gas station kid, he was art designer. His sense of self-worth was no longer tied solely to his paycheck or the lack of traditional employment. It was tied to his visible, valued contribution to his community's resilience. This story powerfully illustrates that psychological transformation at the heart of a regenerative economy. Sam's situation forces us to analyze the redefinition of success, doesn't it? In the old, purely financial paradigm, he was failing. Yet in this new, purpose-driven one, he became a vital, indispensable community asset. The town didn't get its factory back, no, but it started to regenerate its social fabric, its collective spirit, the well-being of its people, by deliberately decoupling human value from purely financial transactions. It shows that when a community shifts its focus from material accumulation to mutual support and shared purpose, it doesn't just become more resilient, it fundamentally changes how its members perceive themselves and their place in the world.
What's profoundly fascinating there is that radical redefinition of success. You're absolutely right. In the old traditional paradigm, Sam was definitely considered failing. Low formal income, valuable skills underutilized in a conventional monetized sense. Yet in this new purpose-driven economy, which emerged organically right out of necessity, he transcended that definition completely. He became a vital community asset. His work, while not monetarily compensated in the traditional way, it garnered him immense social capital, reputation, a profound sense of belonging, and crucially, self-worth. This isn't just about making ends meet, it's about reclaiming dignity, purpose, rebuilding a social fabric in the face of economic decline. That purpose exchange created an alternative system of value, where contribution, connection, collective well-being superseded mere financial transactions. It fundamentally shifted how members perceive themselves and their place in the world, empowering them to see their inherent value beyond just a market price. And this grassroots example from Ohio fits perfectly into the broader concept of the regenerative economy. It's a holistic framework, really designed to address these critical global challenges we face: climate change, resource depletion, ecosystem degradation, pervasive social inequities. Unlike mere sustainability, which often just aims to do less bad by minimizing negative impacts, the regenerative economy actively strives for systemic transformation and long-term resilience. Its goal is to move beyond simply sustaining current levels and to actively do good by restoring, revitalizing, and enhancing natural and social systems. Regenerative economy research is inherently multifaceted. It has to be. It encompasses economic, technological, social, policy dimensions, all interconnected. Its ultimate aim is genuine socio-ecological flourishing, recognizing that human well-being is just inextricably linked to the health of our planet and the strength of our communities. The interconnectedness of these various dimensions is a really key takeaway. It highlights the critical need for comprehensive, integrated approaches that can tackle multiple challenges simultaneously, rather than trying to fix things in isolation.
That interconnectedness makes so much sense, yeah. And when you look closely, you start to see regenerative principles popping up in so many practical areas that directly impact human well-being and community resilience. Let's maybe delve into a few of those specifically. Okay, consider human and social capital. This isn't just about managing employees in the old HR sense. It's about organizational learning, where companies actually evolve to prioritize the well-being of all stakeholders, employees, communities, the environment, right, alongside profits. It involves deep digital transformation within HR to create more adaptive, human-centric workplaces. Think of initiatives like regenerative future centers at universities. They act as hubs, bringing together diverse community members, businesses, policymakers to co-create more equitable, localized development plans together. Or expanded fair trade initiatives that don't just offer better prices, but foster genuine partnerships, aiming for justice and inclusivity across the entire supply chain. And crucially, it covers tangible aspects of health and well-being, things like biophilic urban design, integrating natural elements like green walls, rooftop gardens, natural light into city planning. It's been shown to enhance mental and physical health, reduce stress, improve cognitive function in city dwellers. Then there are the economic and industrial systems themselves. This is where we see really innovative thinking, like ecological theories of money, which rethink monetary design itself to steer economies towards sustainability, creating currencies that actually encourage ecological restoration, not just endless growth. Or green finance, which actively bridges economic inclusion with resource regeneration, directing investment towards sustainable projects like community-owned renewable energy cooperatives that benefit local residents directly. And think of innovations in manufacturing. Redistributed manufacturing coupled with digital intelligence, fostering hyperlocal, circular production that reduces waste and transportation emissions. Or breakthroughs in circular dyeing practices that dramatically reduce water consumption and eliminate toxic synthetic chemicals from textile production. These are profound shifts, really, from the ground up. And what about our urban and built environment? Regenerative approaches here include cutting-edge urban design, repurposing old, unused industrial structures for hydroponic farming, not only creating local food security, but reducing urban heat island effects, transforming blighted areas, or sustainable construction, emphasizing wood frame construction with locally sourced, rapidly renewable timber, offers significantly lower life cycle impacts compared to concrete and steel, and actively sequesters carbon. Even waste management is being reinvented. Things like large-scale food donation networks diverting tons of edible food from landfills to those in need, or the proliferation of independent repair services for electronics, promoting circularity by extending product lifespans, reducing e-waste, rather than encouraging constant consumption of new devices. And finally, technological innovations play a crucial enabling role in all this. Artificial intelligence, for instance, is being deployed in wastewater management to guide resource supply and demand, enhancing efficiency, enabling water reuse. It's also used in intelligent energy management systems to optimize resource use across smart grids, predicting demand, integrating renewables seamlessly. There are digital twins for circular economy applications in supply chain management, creating virtual replicas to simulate and improve material flow, identifying opportunities for reuse and recycling, and the development of truly sustainable materials themselves, like plant-based pigments for cosmetics that avoid harmful chemicals, or ultra-tough recyclable polymers that drastically reduce plastic waste and our reliance on virgin, harmful synthetics. It's all about creating systems that are inherently restorative and self-sustaining rather than extractive.
And building on that, the regenerative well-being economy, or RWE concept, takes these principles and explicitly designs economic systems based on nature's principles. It goes far beyond simple sustainability by making human well-being, environmental sustainability, and social mobilization the primary objectives of the economy, not secondary. The goal is to create a more just and sustainable society, directly addressing the systemic shortcomings of current economic models. Models that often overlook or even actively degrade these vital aspects for the sake of pure financial growth. It's a fundamental shift in design thinking for our entire economic structure, moving from a profit-first mentality to a life-first one. And this leads us right to the purpose-driven economy. This is where these ideas truly move from abstract concept to tangible impact. At its heart, a purpose economy is defined as any economic activity that, in addition to its primary purpose of profit, explicitly adds good for the community and the area to which it belongs. It's about ethical entrepreneurship, recognizing that an enterprise shouldn't just benefit its owners and workers, but actively improve the lives of all it touches, its customers, its suppliers, its local environment, the broader society. It's a deliberate decision to move beyond profit as the sole driver and embrace a wider, more holistic definition of success. You can see this shift most clearly when you contrast it with models like, say, fast fashion. That business model is almost exclusively profit-driven, focused on short-term gains, relying heavily on cheap synthetic materials that pollute with microplastics, and often leveraging algorithms that actually monetize envy through social media. It's designed to do that. Their focus is heavily on rapid communication and marketing over ethical production and long-term environmental responsibility. It's an inherently extractive model that prioritizes quick returns at significant environmental and social costs, constantly creating new desires and then fulfilling them at lightning speed, often with incredibly unsustainable practices.
That contrast with fast fashion really highlights the stakes, doesn't it? But it's fascinating how Made in Italy provides such a powerful, positive example within this purpose-driven economy. Italy, despite being this global textile powerhouse, actually imports most of its natural fibers. But there's one rare exception that can be grown locally and sustainably: industrial hemp. Can you elaborate maybe on why hemp is described as the pig of agriculture and why it's such a game changer for regenerative crops and carbon sequestration?
Absolutely. The pig of agriculture moniker for hemp is actually a high compliment. It refers to its incredible versatility. Just like every part of a pig can be used, literally every part of the hemp plant can be exploited for valuable purposes, from its strong fibers for textiles and sustainable construction materials, to its seeds for highly nutritious food and oil, and its stalks for biomass energy. It's a true multi-purpose crop. Just fantastic. Beyond that, hemp is a game changer for regenerative agriculture because it's a phenomenal carbon sequester. A single hectare of hemp can sequester more CO2 than a hectare of forest. Think about that. Its deep root systems also improve soil health, prevent erosion, and it requires very little water, pesticides, or fertilizers compared to other crops like cotton, for instance. It's an incredibly efficient and restorative plant, truly embodying those regenerative principles.
Okay, that explains why it's so pivotal. And this potential has led to some really pragmatic commitments from companies, even publications. For instance, Lampoon magazine, which focuses on nature and fashion, is actively supporting the development of a regenerative hemp supply chain in Italy. And broader initiatives like Forestami are aiming to plant 3 million trees in Milan by 2030, directly addressing urban reforestation, air quality. Companies like Prototipo Studio. They're not just selling hemp yarning fabrics, they are committed to guaranteeing better income for farmers by supporting regenerative hemp cultivation practices and completely avoiding synthetic fibers in their products. It's a core commitment. This is a clear example of purpose-driven businesses making a powerful social and environmental impact, embedding ethical considerations and regenerative practices directly into their core operations, their supply chains. It shows these aren't just abstract ideas, but real-world strategies being implemented right now.
And this shift from a sole focus on material accumulation to a prioritization of mutual support and shared purpose. It isn't just about economic models. It's deeply, profoundly psychological. When individuals like Sam in Ohio, or companies supporting regenerative agriculture, when they become active participants in this purpose-driven economy, it doesn't just make their communities more resilient, it fundamentally changes how its members perceive themselves and their place in the world. Their self-worth becomes intrinsically tied to their contribution, the strength of their relationships, their positive impact on the collective. Rather than being solely or primarily dependent on their financial status or possessions, it's about internalizing a new, more meaningful definition of value. And if we scale this thinking up to the macroeconomic level, Bhutan's pioneering concept of gross national happiness, or GNH, it presents a truly radical paradigm shift that directly encapsulates these human-centric values. GNH goes far beyond merely measuring material values, like gross domestic product, GDP, which is a standard measure of a nation's economic output. We all know GDP. Instead, GNH incorporates the profound concept of happiness itself. And crucially, not just as fleeting sensory pleasure, but as an innate state of mind, cultivated through spiritual practice, community well-being, ecological health. This is a vital distinction because conventional Western sciences on which modern economic theory is largely based. They often leave human happiness and spiritual well-being outside their measurable scope, tacitly assuming that material development alone will correlate with overall well-being. Bhutan explicitly challenges that assumption head-on. Traditional GDP calculations, for example, have several really significant flaws that GNH seeks to address directly. They don't depreciate natural resources as they're exploited. So if a forest is logged for timber, it counts as income. But the ecological depletion, the loss of biodiversity, that isn't subtracted from the national accounts. It's invisible. GDP also dangerously ignores the vast informal and unpaid compassionate economy. Things like caring for the young, the elderly, volunteering in communities, mutual aid networks, which is estimated to represent about 50% of all productive work globally. Half. This massive amount of value creation simply goes unmeasured. Furthermore, GDP often assumes limitless free goods in nature, failing to account for the true cost of clean air, fresh water, healthy ecosystems. And perhaps most dangerously, it heavily discounts future value for short-term gains, essentially saying $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, which fuels an unsustainable short-term mentality in financial markets, encouraging immediate exploitation over long-term planetary health.
Wow. So if GDP has all those fundamental flaws, Bhutan's approach with GNH really asks us to look beyond just raw economic growth stats and consider a much wider, more interconnected spectrum of values that truly contribute to a nation's well-being and long-term flourishing. It sounds much more complete.
Precisely. GNH is built upon 4 pillars that are designed to holistically guide national policy: sustainable economic development, good governance, cultural preservation, and nature conservation. In this framework, GDP is seen as just a lowest level indicator. It's important, sure, for material well-being, a base level of prosperity, but it's certainly not the ultimate goal or the sole measure of national success. GNH, by contrast, encompasses this holistic spectrum of values, recognizing that true prosperity involves a balance, a mutual dependency between material well-being and the higher levels of human and societal flourishing. It ultimately generates not just financial capital, but also social capital through strong communities, environmental capital through thriving ecosystems, and cultural capital through preserved traditions and shared identity. It's an explicit and deliberate move towards a value-based economic order, where the well-being of people and planet are paramount, rather than just an afterthought.
This deep dive has truly laid bare a profound shift in thinking, hasn't it? From Kenji Tanaka redefining his value within a tech company, to the Ohio Purpose Exchange rebuilding community from the ground up, to an entire nation like Bhutan reimagining national success with gross national happiness. We've explored what it means to move beyond simply being, a productive asset. We're witnessing a growing, I think, undeniable realization that our time, our attention, our inner alignment, our collective well-being, these are the ultimate currencies. This isn't just about tweaking existing systems. It feels like a fundamental re-architecture of how we define value, how we engage with work, and what we truly consider to be success. Systemic change, whether it's at the micro level of an individual renegotiating their worth, or the macro level of entire nations rethinking their economic models, it's not only possible, but perhaps essential for our collective future. It's a powerful idea that by shifting our focus to what truly sustains us, our time, our attention, our inner alignment, we can literally design a future where humanity isn't just surviving, but flourishing.